It's certainly true that China was never going to apologise, and presumably that the Prime Minister must have known that that was the case when he made this statement. Now, I've spoken to quite a few people on both sides of the aisle today about that calculus. The rationale that's been given to me is that the tweet was so lurid, so deliberately provocative and outrageous that it actually required a response. There was a feeling inside the government that it had to be responded to at the highest level because of the gravity of the offence that it caused throughout the government, and the government believes throughout most of Australia. So that's the rationale. But there has been a bit of criticism for the Prime Minister today. A lot of analysts have argued that by elevating this tweet, he just fed oxygen to it. He allowed China to pivot away from the topic that it didn't want to talk about, namely trade, economic coercion, and the possibility of those coercive measures being overturned in international arbitration courts, and onto terrain which is much more awkward, excruciating and painful for Australia, namely the credible allegations of war crimes in Afghanistan. And as you mentioned, there's no backward step from China, far from it. Not only is it refusing to apologise, but this afternoon we had a fresh statement from the Chinese embassy here in Canberra, accusing Canberra of essentially misinterpreting the Chinese spokesman's tweet and stoking nationalism here in Australia. So absolutely no backward step from China.
And Stephen, this spokesperson has been very provocative in the past. There seems to be a level of contempt that China is showing towards Australia that goes beyond what they consider to be our purported offences.
Yes, absolutely. The spokesman in question has a long history of so-called wolf warrior diplomacy. He's previously tweeted out pretty wild allegations or conspiracy theories about the US military bringing coronavirus to Wuhan, amongst other things. He's regularly insulted other countries. So we're not the first to experience this, although it has to be said that the style of propaganda was pretty breathtaking yesterday, even by wolf warrior standards. Now, the interesting question, if you like, from here is what's the audience? What's China's game? Is it primarily to shape domestic politics here in Australia, to try and intimidate Australia through this open display of contempt? Or is it possible that the main audience is actually overseas, other middle powers who are also caught in stoushes with China, who may be watching this very closely? The message that Beijing wants to send to them is very clear. If you overstep the line, if you pick a quarrel with China, then there will be consequences and you will be treated in this way. Not only, of course, with unpleasant tweets, but also with economic coercion and trade sanctions, which we've seen rolled out for the last 4 or 5 months now. So the stakes here are pretty high, Beverly. It's clear that it's not just Australia who's in case here. What's happening in Australia is being watched very carefully around the world, and that might explain why the government, leaving aside the debate over whether Scott Morrison overreacted to that tweet or not, that's why the government remains absolutely steadfast in its determination not to give ground on those concrete issues which China has been looking for Australia to crumble on. When it comes to foreign investment, when it comes to the 5G network, Australia is not for turning.
And while it may not help, Australia has received quite a fair bit of support from other nations who've condemned China's actions.
Yes, there has been some support, in particular from UK lawmakers. They've expressed strong support for Australia. There's also been a fairly strong statement of support from New Zealand across the ditch. So both those countries have made it pretty clear they believe that China's actions are unacceptable. Interestingly, there hasn't yet been a response from the US administration or from the incoming Biden administration. But the feeling here in Canberra is that there will be some sort of statement coming at some point, who it's from, what it says, the level of support thrown behind Canberra from the US will, I think, be an important question and one to watch very closely indeed over the next 24 hours.